Do shave it off," she begged. The rancher stood frozen. But he wouldn't stop. The morning sun rose slowly over the wide, open ranch, painting the fields in soft shades of gold and amber. The air was cool, crisp, and filled with the fresh scent of hay and damp earth. Birds chirped cheerfully, hopping from fence post to tree branch, while a few scattered clouds moved lazily across the brightening sky. It was one of those mornings that made everything seem calm and full of promise, yet beneath the peaceful surface, something in the air felt a little different. Clara stepped out of the small, wooden farmhouse, her bare feet brushing against the dewy grass. She inhaled deeply, letting the scent of the earth fill her lungs. There was something magical about the ranch in the early morning, when the world seemed to wake up slowly, and every sound, from the clucking of chickens to the distant lowing of cows, felt alive and comforting. Clara's long hair, the color of chestnuts with streaks of gold from the sun, fell loosely down her back. It was something she treasured, a part of her identity that she had grown with since childhood. She carried a small bucket in one hand, moving carefully toward the horses in the corral. Each step was measured, practiced over years of helping around the ranch, yet today, her movements felt slightly heavier, as if a small weight had been placed on her chest. The horses were calm, grazing quietly as she approached. Clara had always loved the animals and they seemed to sense her emotions. A tall, sleek mare lifted her head, nuzzling Clara gently, and she smiled. "Good morning, Luna," she whispered. "Did you sleep well?" As she began brushing the horse's coat, Clara noticed movement from the farmhouse porch. Jackson, the rancher and her guardian, was standing there, holding a small, unusual-looking box. He was a large man, strong and weathered, with hands that had clearly known hard work all his life. Yet, his face was softer than his size suggested, showing hints of care and patience for those he looked after. Clara's stomach twisted slightly. Jackson didn't usually carry boxes like that in the morning, especially not one that looked heavy and important. "Morning, Jackson," she said lightly, trying to keep her voice casual, though curiosity and unease bubbled beneath it. He didn't respond right away. He simply watched her, his eyes fixed on something far beyond the corral. There was a stillness about him that made Clara pause. She had seen him quiet many times, but this was different. His hands rested on the box, not moving, but the tension in his posture was unmistakable. Clara tried to shake off the uneasy feeling. "Are you going to tell me what's in the box?" she asked, keeping her tone steady but curious. Jackson didn't answer. He just continued to stand there as if frozen in place. The early morning breeze tugged gently at his shirt, and he shifted slightly, but the box didn't move. Clara frowned, sensing that something unusual was about to happen. She returned to brushing Luna, but her mind was distracted. The box was heavy, made of dark metal with a latch that glinted in the morning light. Clara had an uneasy feeling that it wasn't just ordinary tools or supplies for the ranch. Something about it made her chest tighten. She tried to focus on the horse, feeling the soft, warm coat beneath her fingers, but she couldn't ignore the strange energy radiating from Jackson and the box. Finally, unable to hold back her curiosity any longer, she set down the brush. "Jackson, what's going on? Why are you just standing there with that box?" Her voice carried across the corral, firm yet edged with concern. Jackson's eyes met hers, and for a moment there was silence so complete it almost felt loud. Then, slowly, he lifted a hand and gestured for her to come closer. Clara's heart began to race. The gesture was calm, but the heaviness in the air made her hesitate. She walked slowly toward him, keeping her eyes fixed on the box. As she drew near, she could finally see the contents. A pair of shiny hair clippers lay inside, resting neatly in a molded case. The sight made her stomach drop. She stepped back instinctively. "Clippers? What are you planning to do with these?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. Jackson didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at her with an expression that was difficult to read. There was concern in his eyes, yes, but also something heavier, responsibility perhaps, or a sense of duty that weighed on him more than words could express. Clara's pulse quickened. She didn't like the way his gaze lingered on her hair, her long, treasured hair that she had never let anyone touch without her consent. I just thought, Jackson began slowly, then paused. His words faltered. He wanted to explain, but the right words seemed trapped somewhere deep inside him. Clara's mind raced. She could feel the tension building like a storm on the horizon. "Thought what?" she pressed, her voice firmer now, tinged with both fear and defiance. Jackson took a deep breath. The early morning calm seemed to grow heavier, the birds' songs fading into the background as the silence stretched. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but steady. "It's for your safety, Clara. The long hair, it could get caught. It's dangerous on the ranch." Clara's eyes widened, a mix of disbelief and fear surging through her. She shook her head quickly. "No, you don't understand. My hair, it's me. It's not just hair. I won't let you take it away." Her hands clenched instinctively, gripping the edge of the corral fence for support. Jackson froze. He had expected resistance, perhaps even a struggle, but he hadn't expected the intensity of Clara's reaction. He had only wanted to protect her, never to harm or upset her. Yet in that moment, the situation seemed more complicated than he had imagined. Clara's chest heaved as she tried to calm herself. She loved Jackson, respected him, but this moment felt like a battle she hadn't agreed to fight. Her hair had been a part of her life for as long as she could remember, each strand tied to memories, hopes, and a sense of freedom that no one could take lightly. "Please, Jackson," she whispered, her voice trembling but earnest. Don't take it from me. There has to be another way." Jackson's hands tightened slightly around the box. He looked at her, the morning light highlighting the lines of worry etched on his face. He wanted to argue, to insist that she trust him, but something in her plea struck a chord deep within him. He saw not defiance, but fear and vulnerability, and he realized that protecting someone didn't always mean taking control. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wind stirred, rustling the grass and the leaves on the nearby trees. Clara's hair caught the sunlight, shimmering like strands of copper and gold. It seemed almost alive, a symbol of who she was, and Jackson couldn't help but notice the quiet dignity in the way she held herself despite her fear. Finally, he lowered the box slightly, though he didn't put it down entirely. His eyes softened and a flicker of hesitation crossed his face. Clara, sensing the change, felt a small surge of hope. She took a careful step closer, her hands still clasped tightly together. "Jackson, please," she said again, softer this time, yet filled with determination. "There's always another way. Please let me find it with you, instead of taking this from me." Jackson inhaled deeply, his gaze shifting from the box to Clara's eyes. He could see her courage, her fear, and her unwavering spirit all at once. He felt the weight of the morning, the ranch, and the responsibility he carried pressing down on him. But in that moment, he understood that trust and care were more powerful than control. The sun climbed higher, casting a warm light over the ranch. The horses shifted in the corral, sensing the tension but also the change in the air. Clara stood tall, her hair flowing behind her like a banner of her own identity, and Jackson finally let the clippers rest gently against the box, unclaimed for now. Though the morning had started with unease, it ended with a silent understanding. Something had shifted between them, a lesson unspoken but deeply felt. Clara had spoken her truth, and Jackson had listened. The ranch seemed to breathe with them, the world continuing its quiet rhythm, waiting to see what the day would bring next. And for the first time that morning, Clara felt a glimmer of hope. She knew the day ahead might bring more challenges, but she also knew that she had found her voice, and that it mattered more than any clippers ever could. The morning continued to stretch across the ranch, the sunlight growing stronger as it spilled over the wide fields and rust-colored barns. Clara remained near the corral, her hands still brushing Luna's soft coat, though her mind was far from the horses. She kept sneaking glances at Jackson, who now stood silently on the porch, the box with the hair clippers resting on the step beside him. The quiet between them felt heavy, almost tangible, as if the whole ranch had paused to watch what would happen next. Clara's heart raced. She had never felt so conflicted in her life. She loved the ranch, the animals, and even Jackson in a way that was hard to define, like family and friendship mixed together. But the sight of the clippers earlier had unsettled her deeply. Her hair wasn't just strands of color. It carried her memories, her sense of self, and her pride. It was part of her identity, something no one could simply take away. Finally, after a long moment of silence, Jackson stepped down from the porch and approached her slowly. His expression was calm but serious, each step deliberate, as if he wanted to choose his words carefully. Clara straightened her back, sensing that the conversation she had been dreading was about to happen. "I need to explain, Clara," Jackson began, his voice low but steady. "I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing it because there's a risk, something that could happen on the ranch, and your hair, well, it could get caught." Clara's hands froze on Luna's back. "Caught? What do you mean?" "I've worked here for years and nothing has ever happened," she said, her voice rising slightly, tinged with frustration and fear. Jackson looked down at her, his brow furrowed. I know, he said slowly, "but I can't take the chance this time. The new equipment in the barn, it has moving parts that could be dangerous. One slip, one strand caught, and it could be serious." Clara's stomach twisted. She understood safety. She had learned the hard way that ranch work was never completely safe. But this explanation didn't ease the tightening in her chest. Her hair was long, yes, but it had always been tied up when she worked near machinery. She had always been careful, always cautious. "Jackson, I've always been careful," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You know me. You know I wouldn't let anything happen to myself. Why would you even think of taking it from me?" Jackson shifted uncomfortably, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He had spent years working on this ranch, protecting those under his care, making decisions that weren't always easy. And now he faced a moment that tested not just his judgment but his heart. He wanted to protect Clara, yes, but at what cost? Forcing her to cut her hair felt wrong, and he knew it. Yet the thought of leaving a potential danger unchecked made him uneasy. "Because I care, Clara," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm. "I've seen what can happen on this ranch. I've lost people, accidents happen, and I can't risk it. Not you." Clara's eyes filled with emotion, a mix of relief that he cared and anger that he would even consider taking her hair away. She stepped back, brushing a hand through her long strands as if holding onto them could anchor her in this storm of emotions. "Jackson, don't you see? This isn't just about my safety. My hair, it's me. It's part of who I am. If you take it, it's like you're taking a part of me. I can't let you do that." Jackson hesitated, his hands tightening slightly at his sides. He had never seen Clara so passionate, so resolute, and it gave him pause. For years, he had been the one making decisions, giving instructions, protecting the ranch and everyone on it. But now, for the first time, he realized that protecting someone wasn't just about following rules or removing risks. Sometimes, it was about listening, understanding, and trusting them to make their own choices. The tension between them grew, unspoken yet powerful. Clara's heart pounded as she tried to steady her breathing. She had always been independent, always fought for her own voice, and this was no different. "There has to be another way," she said softly but firmly. "I'm willing to be careful, to tie my hair up, to do whatever it takes, but don't just decide for me." Jackson took a slow breath. The morning sun glinted off the clippers in the box, and for a moment the shiny metal seemed almost threatening. Clara's eyes were fixed on him, waiting, pleading, hoping he would understand. He looked at her, truly looked, and saw not just a young woman with long hair, but someone full of courage, intelligence, and a sense of self that demanded respect. He knew that if he went through with it, he might protect her physically, but he would damage something far more important, the trust between them. And for Jackson, trust was everything. He had learned the hard way that trust was fragile, delicate, and once broken, not easily repaired. Finally, he sighed and moved the clippers a little further from the edge of the box, putting a small distance between them. "Okay," he said quietly. Let's think about this. There has to be a way to keep you safe without doing something you don't want." Clara's shoulders relaxed slightly, relief washing over her. She stepped closer, brushing her hair gently out of her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "That's all I ask. Please just hear me out. Let's find a solution together." Jackson nodded slowly, his gaze softening. The tension in the air seemed to lift slightly, though the weight of responsibility still pressed on him. He had a lot to consider: the machinery, the animals, the long hours, and the unexpected hazards that came with life on the ranch. But he also had to consider Clara, her feelings, and the respect he owed her as someone he cared for deeply. For the next hour, they moved around the ranch together, discussing safety measures, examining equipment, and finding ways to make the work environment secure. Clara suggested tying her hair back tightly, wearing protective gear, and being extra cautious near moving parts. Jackson listened carefully, occasionally nodding, occasionally asking questions, but he didn't insist or push. Instead, he allowed her voice to guide the decisions, realizing that collaboration was stronger than control. The horses grazed nearby, sensing the change in mood. Luna nuzzled Clara, offering comfort, and the other animals moved calmly, as if acknowledging that the tension had lessened. Clara felt a small sense of triumph, not just for protecting her hair, but for asserting her voice and finding a solution together. She realized that courage wasn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was simply standing firm, speaking your truth, and trusting that it would be heard. As the morning wore on, Jackson and Clara finished their preparations. The ranch seemed safer, not because of the clippers or any drastic measure, but because they had worked together to find a solution. Clara's hair was tied neatly behind her head, secure and out of the way, and she moved through the tasks with renewed confidence. Jackson watched her carefully, still carrying the box of clippers, but now with a lighter heart. He had learned something important. Protecting someone didn't mean controlling them. It meant listening, understanding, and sometimes stepping back. By the time the sun was high in the sky, the ranch was alive with the sounds of activity, animals moving, the wind rustling through the trees, and the distant hum of farm equipment. Clara worked alongside Jackson, their earlier tension transformed into a quiet understanding. She felt proud, not just of herself, but of the way they had handled the situation together. And Jackson, for his part, felt a deep sense of respect for her courage and clarity. The morning ended not with conflict, but with connection. Clara and Jackson had faced a challenge, and though it had been uncomfortable and tense, they had emerged stronger, more understanding of each other's perspectives. The ranch, bathed in golden sunlight, seemed to breathe along with them, a silent witness to the lessons learned. Clara paused for a moment, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face, and looked at Jackson. "I'm glad we figured it out together," she said softly. Jackson nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Me too," he replied. "Me too." In that moment, the sun overhead seemed brighter, the world a little safer, and the bond between them a little stronger. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and tension, and through patience, respect, and understanding, they had found a solution that honored both safety and personal choice. And as they continued their work on the ranch, both of them knew that this morning would stay with them for a long time, a reminder that listening, caring, and trusting could solve even the hardest problems. The afternoon sun was high in the sky, casting long shadows across the ranch and warming the earth beneath the wide open fields. The air was thick with the smell of hay and the faint aroma of warm soil that had been touched by the morning sun. Clara worked quietly near the barn, checking the fencing and ensuring that the animals were secure. Her hair was tied tightly behind her head, just as she and Jackson had agreed earlier. Still, a lingering unease hovered in her chest. She couldn't shake the memory of the hair clippers sitting on the porch, shiny and sharp, a silent reminder of what could have been. Jackson had moved on to check the water troughs, his large hands steady as he filled each container. Yet, even as he worked, his mind lingered on the tension from earlier. Clara's reaction had surprised him, not because she had protested, but because of the fire in her eyes and the clarity of her voice. She had stood her ground, and he had listened. It had been difficult to step back, but the relief and quiet understanding that followed reminded him that strength didn't always come from authority. Sometimes it came from trust. Despite the calm that had returned, the afternoon carried its own challenges. A sudden movement in the far field caught Clara's eye. A young calf had wandered close to the edge of the fence, its small legs unsteady on the soft soil. Without thinking, she ran toward it, her heart racing. The calf bleated in confusion, and Clara moved carefully, speaking softly to calm it. She crouched down and reached out her hands, feeling the warmth of its tiny body beneath her fingers. Jackson noticed immediately and hurried over, concern etched into his face. "Careful, Clara," he called, his voice steady but urgent. "Don't get too close. That fence isn't safe for anyone to lean on." Clara nodded, but she continued her gentle approach. "I'm being careful," she said, her voice soft but determined. "I've got it." Jackson slowed as he approached, his eyes scanning the area for potential hazards. The ranch was beautiful, yes, but it was also full of unpredictable dangers. Loose boards, hidden holes, and heavy equipment could turn a simple task into a dangerous situation. He knew that Clara was capable, but he also couldn't ignore the risks. The calf finally calmed under Clara's touch, and she smiled down at it, feeling a sense of accomplishment. "There," she said quietly, "all safe." Jackson let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding and approached her slowly. "Good job," he said, his voice softer now, almost admiring. "You handled that well." Clara looked up at him, her hair glinting in the sunlight as she brushed it behind her shoulder. "I told you I could," she replied, a small smile playing on her lips. For a moment they simply stood there, the calf nuzzling Clara's hands, and the ranch around them humming with life. It was a rare pause in a day that was usually filled with constant movement and work. Yet beneath the calm surface, the tension from earlier lingered like a shadow, reminding both of them that the earlier conversation about her hair had not been forgotten. Later, as Clara moved toward the barn to check the equipment, Jackson followed. His hands rested on his hips, and his eyes scanned the area carefully. The barn was quiet, filled with the faint scent of hay and oil from the machinery stored inside. It was a place of work, yes, but also a place where accidents could happen in an instant if one was not careful. "Jackson," Clara began cautiously, "can we talk for a moment?" Jackson nodded, setting down the tools he had been carrying. "Of course," he said, his tone measured. "What's on your mind?" Clara hesitated for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "I know you were trying to protect me earlier," she said, "and I understand why you were worried about my hair, but I also need you to understand how important it is to me. I'm not just being stubborn. This is who I am. I need you to trust me to make safe choices too." Jackson looked at her, the lines on his face softening. He had always known that Clara was independent, strong-willed, and wise beyond her years. But hearing her speak so clearly about her feelings, so calmly yet firmly, made him pause and reconsider. He realized that trust was not just about keeping her safe physically, it was also about respecting her autonomy and her voice. "You're right," he said quietly. "I was trying to protect you, but I see now that there are other ways that don't take away your choices." Clara felt a small relief in her chest. It was a start, a step toward understanding, but she knew that they still had to navigate the day carefully. The ranch, after all, was unpredictable, and even with precautions, anything could happen. As they continued their work, Clara suggested a system for keeping the barn safe while allowing her to move freely. She tied her hair securely, wore protective gloves, and carefully maneuvered around the machinery. Jackson watched her closely, offering guidance when necessary but allowing her to take the lead. The balance between caution and independence created a rhythm, a silent agreement that they would work together rather than one imposing control over the other. The afternoon passed slowly, each task completed with care and attention. Clara repaired a section of the fence, checked on the water troughs, and ensured that the animals had enough food. Jackson moved alongside her, helping where needed but stepping back when she was capable. Their cooperation was quiet but effective, a testament to the lessons they had learned earlier in the day. At one point, Clara paused and looked out across the fields. The sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows and bathing everything in a warm, golden light. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool breeze against her face. "It's beautiful," she said softly, almost to herself. Jackson glanced up and followed her gaze. "It is," he agreed. "Days like this remind me why I do this work, why I stay here even when it's hard." Clara nodded, feeling a connection not just to the land, but to the life they shared on the ranch. It was hard work, yes, and sometimes dangerous, but it was also filled with moments of quiet beauty and accomplishment. And today, amidst the tension and fear, she had discovered something else, her own strength and the value of standing firm for what mattered to her. As the sun continued its slow descent, Clara and Jackson returned to the farmhouse, finishing the day's chores with a sense of satisfaction. The barn doors were closed, the animals were secure, and the tools were stored safely. The clippers, though still on the porch, no longer carried the same threat they had earlier. They were simply tools, waiting for a purpose that no longer involved taking away Clara's choice. Inside the farmhouse, Clara prepared a small meal, the aroma of fresh bread and vegetables filling the kitchen. Jackson sat at the wooden table, quietly observing her. There was a new respect in his eyes, a recognition of her courage and determination. "You handled today well," he said finally, breaking the silence. Clara smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "We handled it," she corrected gently. "Together." Jackson nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. There was a quiet understanding between them now, a bond forged not through control or fear, but through respect, trust, and the willingness to listen. It was a lesson that neither of them would forget, a memory that would shape how they faced challenges in the days to come. As evening fell over the ranch, the sky turned shades of pink and orange, and the first stars began to appear. Clara stepped outside for a moment, feeling the cool breeze against her face and the soft earth beneath her feet. She ran a hand through her hair, still tied neatly behind her head, and felt a sense of pride and relief. Today had been difficult, yes, but it had also been a reminder that strength came in many forms, not just in action, but in words, choices, and the courage to stand firm. Jackson joined her on the porch, leaning against the railing as he watched the sky. "It's been a long day," he said quietly. Clara nodded. "Yes, it has, but I think we've learned a lot, haven't we?" He smiled, a genuine warmth in his expression. "We have," he agreed. "And I'm proud of you, Clara, for standing up, for being brave, and for trusting me enough to work through this together." Clara felt a sense of connection that went beyond words. It was more than relief, more than understanding. It was the knowledge that even in moments of fear, conflict, and uncertainty, respect, patience, and listening could create solutions stronger than any command or order. As night settled over the ranch, the lights in the farmhouse glowed softly, casting long shadows across the yard. The animals were quiet, the fields calm, and Clara felt a sense of peace. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work, and perhaps new fears. But she also knew that she had discovered something invaluable today. Her own voice, her courage, and the power of standing together with someone who cared enough to listen. And as she drifted off to sleep later that night, Clara knew that she was ready for whatever the ranch, or life itself, might bring next. The next morning began with a quiet tension, heavier than the usual calm that spread over the ranch at dawn. The sky was painted in pale shades of pink and orange, the air crisp and clear, carrying the faint scent of dew-soaked grass. Clara stepped outside, the familiar sounds of birds and animals surrounding her, yet she felt an unease that clung to her chest. Something about today felt different, more serious, more urgent. Her hair, still long and tied neatly behind her head, swayed slightly in the morning breeze as she moved toward the barn. She carried a small basket of tools, checking each item carefully before setting them down near the workbench. The routine, usually comforting, felt heavier today. She could sense that Jackson, too, was unsettled. Jackson emerged from the farmhouse, the clippers still in the box on the porch. His face was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of concern. Clara noticed immediately. There was a moment of stillness between them, a quiet acknowledgement that the previous day's tension had not completely disappeared. The memory of their conversation lingered, and while both had found understanding, the challenge of the ranch and its dangers still loomed over them. "Morning," Jackson said quietly, his voice steady but carrying a hint of worry. "We need to finish the checks around the barn today. There's a lot to do before the equipment arrives this afternoon." Clara nodded, her hands tightening slightly around the basket. "I understand," she replied, her voice calm but alert. She could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her, not just for her own safety, but for the safety of the animals and the ranch. She knew Jackson was worried, and she didn't want to add to his burden, yet she also wanted to ensure her voice and her choices were respected. They moved together through the barnyard, checking fences, feeding the animals, and inspecting machinery. The morning passed in a rhythm of careful work, each task carried out with precision and focus. Clara noticed how Jackson's eyes constantly scanned the area, assessing every potential risk. It reminded her of how much he cared, how much he carried on his shoulders. And yet, she also realized how important it was for him to trust her judgment, just as much as she trusted his guidance. Around midday, a sudden movement in the barn caught Clara's attention. A young foal, curious and energetic, had wandered too close to a partially open door leading to the field. Without thinking, Clara moved quickly to guide it back, her heart racing. The foal bleated nervously, its small hooves slipping slightly on the smooth floor. "Clara, wait!" Jackson's voice rang out, urgent but controlled. He ran toward her, hands outstretched, but she was already close to the foal. She reached down, speaking softly to calm it, her fingers brushing its soft mane. Jackson arrived just as she managed to guide the foal safely back toward the center of the barn. His chest rose and fell quickly, the tension evident in his body. "Careful," he said, his voice steady but layered with concern. "That was close." Clara looked up at him, her eyes filled with determination. "I was careful," she said softly, though her own pulse was still racing. "I've got this." Jackson took a moment, observing her closely. She had handled the situation with skill and calm, and he knew she was right. She could manage this, she could take precautions, and she was capable of making safe choices. Yet, the clippers still rested in the box on the porch, a silent reminder of what had been at stake. After ensuring the foal was calm, Clara moved toward the corner of the barn where some older machinery was stored. Today, the new equipment was scheduled to arrive, and they needed to prepare the space. She examined the tools, checking for sharp edges, loose parts, and any other hazards that could cause problems later. Jackson moved behind her, offering guidance but letting her lead. "Jackson," Clara began, hesitating for a moment. "I know you're worried about my hair, about safety, but I can be careful. I can do this. I need you to trust me." Jackson paused, looking at her. He had always trusted her abilities, but seeing her so earnest, so unwavering in her plea, made him realize the depth of her courage. He could see the strength in her eyes, the determination to stand firm without defiance, without anger. It was a delicate balance, and he respected it. "You're right," he said finally, his voice calm. "You've proven that you're capable. I need to trust you more, and I will. But I'll be close by, watching, just in case." Clara nodded, relief washing over her. She understood his concern, and she appreciated that he wasn't ignoring it. He was simply learning to balance his worry with respect for her autonomy. It was a lesson for both of them, a step toward mutual understanding. As the morning continued, the new equipment was delivered. Workers arrived, carefully moving each piece into the barn and ensuring everything was installed properly. Clara and Jackson coordinated with them, checking for safety at every step. Clara tied her hair back tighter, double-checked her gloves, and ensured that all protective measures were in place. Jackson observed quietly, noting her careful planning and execution. The day was long, filled with tasks that required both focus and cooperation. Clara moved steadily, carefully navigating around the machinery, ensuring the animals remained calm and assisting the workers as needed. Jackson followed her lead, offering help when necessary but stepping back to allow her independence. The rhythm of the ranch, the cooperation, and the shared responsibilities created a sense of harmony that had been missing during the earlier tension. In the late afternoon, a small accident occurred. One of the workers dropped a wrench near the edge of a stall, causing a loud clatter that startled the foal. Clara reacted quickly, moving to calm the animal and ensure it didn't run into danger. Jackson rushed over, but she had already guided the foal to safety. "See," she said, breathing heavily but smiling slightly. "I can handle this." Jackson's eyes softened. He realized then that the true lesson of the past days wasn't about hair, clippers, or even equipment. It was about trust, communication, and understanding. Clara had proven that she could act responsibly, make decisions, and handle unexpected challenges without losing control or panicking. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the fields in shades of orange and gold, Clara and Jackson finished their work for the day. The barn was organized, the animals safe, and the equipment properly stored. They moved toward the farmhouse together, tired but satisfied with their accomplishments. Clara paused at the porch, glancing at the clippers still in the box. She ran a hand gently through her hair, feeling the softness of each strand, the warmth of sunlight reflecting off it. She realized that this small act of standing her ground, of communicating clearly and asserting her voice, had brought a new understanding between her and Jackson. It wasn't just about hair. It was about respect, trust, and learning to work together even in difficult moments. Jackson noticed her pause and smiled quietly. "You handled everything well today," he said softly. "I'm proud of you, Clara, not just for what you did, but for how you did it, with courage, patience, and care." Clara returned the smile, feeling a warmth in her chest that went beyond pride. "Thank you," she said, "but we did it together. I couldn't have done it without you listening and trusting me." The evening descended gently over the ranch. The animals settled into their stalls, the wind whispered through the trees, and the sky darkened to deep shades of purple and blue. Clara and Jackson stood on the porch for a while, enjoying the calm, the sense of completion, and the unspoken understanding that had grown between them. In that moment, both knew that the challenge of the clippers and the hair had been more than just a test of courage. It had been a lesson in empathy, respect, and the delicate balance between concern and autonomy. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and tension, and had emerged stronger and closer for it. As the first stars began to appear in the evening sky, Clara tied her hair back one last time and took a deep breath. The ranch was quiet, the animals safe, and the work done. She felt a sense of peace, knowing that she had found her voice, stood firm in her beliefs, and had been heard. Jackson joined her on the porch, leaning against the railing. "It's been a long day," he said quietly. Clara nodded. "Yes, it has. But I think we've learned something important today." Jackson smiled faintly. "We have," he agreed, "and I think we'll remember it for a long time." The ranch, bathed in the soft glow of evening, seemed to settle into a gentle rhythm, carrying the lessons of the day into the night. Clara felt proud, not just of her actions, but of the way she and Jackson had navigated a challenge together. And Jackson, for his part, felt a deep respect for her courage, patience, and determination. As they moved inside to rest, the memory of the Clippers no longer held fear. It had become a symbol of a challenge faced, a lesson learned, and a bond strengthened through understanding, trust, and mutual respect. The morning light filtered gently through the farmhouse windows, painting the kitchen in soft shades of gold. Clara moved slowly, carrying a small basket of feed for the animals. She felt calm but alert. A quiet determination settled in her heart. Yesterday had been long and challenging, but it had taught her something she would carry for a lifetime: the power of speaking her truth and standing firm in her choices. Jackson sat at the kitchen table, sipping a cup of coffee, his eyes on the rising sun through the window. He had been awake before her, planning the day ahead, thinking through the tasks that needed to be completed on the ranch. Yet, even as he focused on practical concerns, his mind kept returning to Clara. She had handled the challenges of the past 2 days with a combination of courage, patience, and wisdom that left him both impressed and humbled. Clara placed the basket down and moved toward the door, her hair tied neatly behind her head. She had chosen to braid it this morning, a small act of care that made her feel grounded and ready for the day. She glanced at Jackson, offering him a small smile. "Ready for another day?" she asked softly. Jackson returned the smile, though it was faint and thoughtful. "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied. There was a quiet understanding between them now, a bond forged not through conflict, but through respect, trust, and the willingness to listen. The day began with routine tasks, but even the familiar work carried a sense of importance now. Clara moved confidently through the barn, checking the fences, feeding the animals, and ensuring everything was in order. Jackson followed, observing her carefully, stepping in only when necessary, but mostly allowing her independence. Each task they completed together strengthened the rhythm between them, a silent agreement that they could rely on each other while respecting their own abilities. As they worked, Clara felt a renewed sense of pride. She had faced the fear of losing her hair, had spoken her truth, and had been heard. More than that, she had proven to herself, and to Jackson, that she could navigate challenges responsibly with both caution and courage. Her heart felt light, yet strong, filled with the satisfaction of knowing that standing firm did not have to mean confrontation or anger. It could mean clear communication and mutual understanding. Around midday, the ranch grew busier. Workers moved equipment, repaired fences, and tended to animals, all under Clara and Jackson's careful supervision. A group of young calves wandered into a corner of the pasture, curious and playful. Clara moved toward them with ease, guiding them gently back to the center of the field. Jackson watched silently, admiration in his eyes. She moved with confidence, her hair neatly braided behind her, a symbol of both practicality and personal pride. At one point, Clara paused to rest, leaning against a fence post as she watched the animals graze. Jackson approached, his hands resting on the railing beside her. For a moment they simply stood in silence, watching the field stretch out before them, feeling the warmth of the sun and the gentle breeze. "You've done well, Clara," Jackson said quietly, his voice thoughtful. "Not just with the work, but everything. How you handled the past few days. I've learned a lot from watching you." Clara felt a warm smile spread across her face. "Thank you," she said softly. "But I couldn't have done it without you listening, without letting me take responsibility. That mattered more than anything." Jackson nodded, his eyes reflecting a mixture of pride and respect. "You're right," he admitted. "I've always tried to protect you, sometimes maybe too much, but now I understand that protection isn't just about control. It's about trust and giving you the space to make your own choices." The calm of the afternoon was briefly interrupted when a strong wind swept across the ranch, rustling the trees and causing a few tools to topple over. Clara moved quickly to secure everything, her hands steady and practiced. Jackson followed closely, ready to assist, but she handled the situation with ease. It was a reminder to both of them that life on the ranch was unpredictable, that challenges could appear without warning, and that preparedness and courage were essential. Later, as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Clara led Jackson to a small area near the corral, where she had set up a new system for securing the animals and machinery safely. "I thought about ways we could make this safer," she explained, showing him the braided ropes, secured gates, and organized tools. "This way, nothing can get loose, and we can avoid accidents without taking unnecessary risks." Jackson examined her work carefully, impressed by her thoughtfulness and attention to detail. "You've done an excellent job," he said. "I can see that you've thought this through. I'm proud of you, Clara, not just for today but for all the choices you've made." Clara felt a swell of pride, not just for completing the tasks, but for the journey she had taken over the past few days. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and tension, and had emerged stronger, more confident, and deeply aware of her own capabilities. Her hair, long and braided, symbolized not just personal pride, but resilience and self-respect. As evening settled over the ranch, the sky painted in shades of pink and orange, Clara and Jackson walked slowly toward the farmhouse. The animals were secure, the equipment properly stored, and the day's work complete. The clippers, still resting in the box on the porch, no longer carried the weight of threat. They were simply tools, waiting for a purpose that no longer involved taking away Clara's choice. Inside the farmhouse, the warm glow of lamplight filled the kitchen. Clara prepared a simple meal, the aroma of fresh bread, roasted vegetables, and herbs filling the room. Jackson set the table quietly, his movements calm but deliberate. There was a new rhythm to their interactions, a sense of mutual respect and understanding that had grown stronger over the past days. As they sat down to eat, Clara glanced at Jackson. "I'm glad we worked through everything," she said softly. "Not just about my hair, but everything. I feel stronger now, more capable, and more understood." Jackson smiled warmly, a deep sense of admiration in his eyes. "I'm proud of you," he said. "You've taught me as much as I've guided you. I realize now that strength isn't just about control, it's about courage, communication, and trust." The evening passed peacefully, filled with quiet conversation, laughter, and a shared sense of accomplishment. Outside, the stars began to twinkle in the clear night sky, casting their soft light across the fields and barns. Clara stepped onto the porch for a moment, looking up at the vast expanse of sky, feeling a deep connection to the ranch, to the land, and to the life she had chosen. Jackson joined her, leaning against the railing beside her. "It's a beautiful night," he said quietly. Clara nodded, brushing a hand gently through her hair, now braided into a neat plait that hung down her back. "It is," she agreed. "And it feels even more beautiful knowing we face the challenges together." For a long moment, they stood in silence, listening to the gentle rustle of leaves, the distant sounds of animals settling in for the night, and the soft wind moving across the fields. It was a moment of reflection, a time to appreciate the lessons learned, the trust earned, and the bonds strengthened through shared experiences. As the night deepened, Clara returned inside, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in days. She carefully unbraided her hair before bed, running her fingers through the soft strands, feeling their warmth and presence. It was a simple act, yet it carried profound meaning, a reminder of her autonomy, her courage, and the lessons she had learned about standing firm while remaining open to understanding. Jackson sat nearby, reading quietly by the lamplight, reflecting on the journey of the past days. He thought about the Clippers, the tension, and the challenges they had faced together. He realized that the true lesson wasn't about control, authority, or even safety. It was about listening, understanding, and trusting someone you care about to make responsible choices. As Clara drifted off to sleep, she felt a deep sense of contentment. She had faced fear, expressed her truth, and been heard. She had worked hard, overcome challenges, and proven her strength, not just to Jackson, but to herself. And in that process, she had strengthened a bond that would carry through all the days to come. The ranch, now quiet under the soft glow of the moon, seemed to settle into a gentle rhythm, carrying the lessons of the day into the night. Clara and Jackson had faced uncertainty, tension, and fear, and had emerged stronger, more connected, and wiser for it. Their journey together had shown that courage, communication, and trust were the true pillars of safety, respect, and understanding. And as the stars shone brightly overhead, Clara knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she had the strength, wisdom, and voice to face them with confidence, guided by the lessons of the past days and the unwavering support of someone who had learned to listen and respect. Her choices,